Well, the results that I definitely wanted this weekend. Manchester City, Man United, 2-0 to United, with them beating City to reach their third successive FA Cup final. The better team definitely came out on top. I mean, how impressed were you, Rach, with Man United's performance? Or, on the other hand, how disappointed were you with Man City? It feels like there's two things at play here. Man United did really well. Man City did not seem to be at the races.
Two things. Man United did really well. I don't feel disappointed in Manchester City. I feel bad for Manchester City, actually.
Okay.
I think I'd hoped after this international break, Manchester City would be coming back with more players available. Instead, they came back with less players available.
For sure.
So, they were already treading a very thin line depth-wise, and it felt a bit like players were being told, we just got to get through this window, and once we reach international break we'll have more players coming back, and that just didn't seem to happen. Whether it was one game too soon for some of them, I don't know, but I think you're right. Manchester United played well. I thought it was a really mature performance. I thought they looked the game, they knew where they could get at City. We went out for a run beforehand, and we were walking back, and I looked at City's lineup and I thought, okay, some of the players I thought that might be back aren't even on the bench. And I said to Soph, if United, which they should, start quickly and press that back line, Manchester City are going to struggle and they're going to get an early goal.
You called it.
And that's exactly what happened. And I think that was really good gameplay from Man United. They knew where the weaknesses were. They know what their strengths were. And I think in the past, sometimes they don't always capitalise on those opportunities in those moments. So the fact that they did so early on was a really good sign. And it just allowed them to be, like, it was a mature, confident performance from them. And I think a lot of things from Manchester United are often about experiencing those moments before and beating Manchester City before and getting into an FA Cup final before. Like, all of these things then really make these occasions less stressful maybe, or less pressurised. And it kind of showed in their performance, I think.
It was definitely a very assured performance from Man United, and I do feel like you're completely right. I think they took the game to City so early doors. To get that first goal within 6 minutes, I think really settled them down, and I felt like from that point onwards, I mean, they were enjoying the game beforehand, it felt like, but I feel like it gave them the confidence to really step into things. I mean, but let's talk about Celine Bizet's goal, because the opening goal was an absolute thing of beauty. Her fourth goal of this FA Cup campaign, and also her 50th career goal. I mean, you've got to give her credit. I mean, the angle on the ball, the way she struck the ball, the curve on it, taking it past Chiara Keaton. I think Chiara just about got a couple of fingers to the ball, not enough to kind of tip it past the post. And I think she was quite upset with her, not even upset with herself. I think she was upset that she was put in that situation in the first place. And so the defence was just nowhere to be seen, and she was quite exposed. But yeah, I mean, the way she kicked the ball away, obviously not the best start to trying to get into the FA Cup final. But yeah, Celine Bizet, I mean, how well do we think she did? Because that was just unreal. Yeah,
a super goal, and a player that can take those opportunities, which I think is really important. I think she's a really good signing for Manchester United. Maybe flies under the radar a little bit, but deservedly getting the goal there. Maybe if I was to talk about being a little bit disappointed in Man City, it would be that they didn't not prepare, but like, it was obvious how Manchester United were going to start, right? Surely. So to be picked apart so quickly and so early on, I think you could be a little bit disappointed by that. But I just think what's great with United, and it's quite contrasting with how City are playing at the moment, is, not loads of rotation, which sometimes we criticise, but it does mean that, a fully fit squad to choose from pretty much, players who know each other really well, who play with each other week in, week out, versus a team that are having to bring in players that maybe don't play all that regularly, maybe don't even play in that position. You had players being pushed up into different positions, and it's a real shuffling of the pack, which you could see because there was less of that kind of fluidity with Manchester City, with players knowing where each other were going to be. For sure. Less instinctive. Like, there were just moments where you were like, you should instinctively know that in this situation you should be stepping out, or for a player. Like, there was a shot in the second half, I think it was, an absolute bullet of a shot, and they'd initially defended it and it came back out, and it might have been Clinton or Galton who absolutely buried it, and Keating stopped it.
Oh, it went directly at her. The three defenders just stood still. It was baffling.
Yes, and I actually went and Googled what the opposite of instinctive is, and I couldn't find, maybe our listeners can tell me what word I would use, but it was that lack of instinct at times where players just didn't seem to kind of react quick enough. And, you know, maybe it is because there's different relationships on the pitch that they're having to get used to. And it just felt a little bit more individual rather than collective, whereas Man United just looked like a unit moving together where everyone knew where everyone was going to be and what the game plan was.
Yeah, definitely. I think there was a sort of symbiosis, especially between the front line. I thought the Man United attacking line were absolutely on fire. And I think that was married with the fact that the Man City back line did not look, they looked completely disjointed. And I think I felt really sorry actually for Gracie Pryor. I don't think she had the best game at all. I think both goals probably they did involve her in some way, and I don't think she had the best performance there. And I feel really sorry. Obviously she's such a youngster. I feel really bad even just saying this. It feels like yeah, I don't want to say it.
But she learned from it. Like
100%.
And I think she's been thrown into the deep end. You've got like Lazelle, you've got Emily Murphy, you've got so many youngsters on there that are expected to be game changers for Manchester City. And realistically, that's not their job yet and shouldn't be their job yet, but they don't have a choice. So it's a bit like out of the fire cauldron into the fire, whatever the phrase. I'm struggling today at my phrases, but you know, she will massively learn from this. Kiara Keating had a season like that and massively learned from it. So it was tough, and those moments are going to happen. If you keep being put in these high pressure moments, your mistakes will be noticeable, especially if you're a defender. But I know, I'm sure United fans don't want to talk about Manchester City's injuries and, you know, just want to enjoy the fact that they won. And absolutely, you should. You're going to Wembley. It's fantastic. But you can't not talk about Manchester City's injuries, because the list could nearly be its own starting 11. When you looked at the bench of who was sitting in the stands, you know, the Shaw, Greenwood, Hemp, Vigino, Kanak, Miedema, Roord, Fowler going off in the 17th minute. Like that was, for me, that was like nail in the coffin in terms of the game. I thought United will absolutely win this. And I think the commentators were saying it, Bunny Shaw and Miedema have been involved in 30 goals collectively across Manchester City's games this season. That's a huge number to then be missing. 100%. Add to that basically most of your front line. So yeah, it's just felt a bit like I said that like Manchester City's defence at times looked like a rickety bridge with like a pack herd coming towards it. Do you know, the kind of way, like it just they've had to kind of be patchworked a little bit, and it's really bloody hard. And I think it kind of happens to a team. Each season there's a team that gets a really unfair amount of injuries.
Arsenal had it a couple seasons back.
Everton had it last season, and it's how they manage, and sometimes it galvanises you. And I think the difficulty for City is that they're in so many competitions. They were already looking like a team that didn't have enough depth for 4 competitions. And I hope that this is a bit of a kick up the arse to the club to show you can make these, like, go far in competitions. Stop waiting for that before you actually start fielding a team that can manage it. Because I was told you that before, was something Gareth Taylor said, like, we don't build a squad to go far in competitions until we get there, which is such a backwards way of doing it. Because imagine how far they could have gone if they'd had proper depth. And, you know, it happened last season and they lost on goal difference. So, it's not something you can ignore when it's essentially a spine of a team, players that are scoring loads of goals. If any other team had that, you'd have to talk about it.
No, I completely agree with what you're saying there, Rach. I think obviously now the silverware hopes for Man City have ended, the Champions League spot looks a little beyond them. Obviously not been the greatest campaign for City. It kind of feels like, and we were kind of talking about this before the pod started, about whether this is just one of those write-off situations, that it's just one of those unlucky, unfortunate seasons. Things have not gone to plan. But also, could you have done better with the transfer window last year? I mean, obviously didn't do massive business, but do we think actually this is a bit of like you said, a kick up the bum to kind of, you know, put your money in your pockets and start looking at building that squad depth if you want to really go far in all of the competitions that you're in?
And maybe as well a review of, you know, the injuries that they're getting. And you know, I was saying this on our Instagram live of the weekend, like, it's not like a heavy criticism and to be like, this is your fault and this is why all the players are getting injured. There's lots of reasons. It can be a simple knock, it can be a, you know, whatever it might be. But I do think it's important when you get a rake of injuries. Arsenal did it, they do a review. Everton did it, they do a review. You know, it was something Brian Sorensen spoke about, that sometimes the shift in going from club to international, to your national team, and you might be playing somewhere slightly different. And he used, at the time, Natalie Bjorn as an example, where she'd been playing central for them, and when she played for Sweden, she was playing as a fullback. And he said the expectation, the loading on the body is totally different, how you prep for that is different, and sometimes it's those maybe connections that need to be looked at again? Is there enough kind of, and they're all professionals, they're all very, very good at their jobs, but that kind of thing forces you to kind of look and say, are we getting absolutely everything spot on? So I think there might be an element to that, but more broadly, just like, you're getting players and you have the quality that can get you far in competitions, and it's almost a shame to look back and say this was a failure of a season when you think how far they've gotten in competitions despite all the injuries. But hopefully it is something that kind of makes them review and go again and really like go for it next season.
100%. I think it's also going to be super interesting to see what happens with Nick Cushing. So Man City's director of women's football said she's not ruled out the possibility of the interim head coach staying on this summer. I mean, obviously, like you said, it does feel a little bit unfortunate that he's come in, sort of had this run of results, but also not entirely his fault. Obviously, he's come in at
Was it the right decision? That's the question. To get rid of Taylor when they did.
The timing of it, I think we obviously discussed back in, what was it, January now? But was it March?
Yeah, because it was right before March Madness.
Oh, that was that spate, wasn't it? It was a spate of like manager
and it was 4 days before the bloody final.
Yes,
before the first game.
100%. And it kind of feels like, well, you know, there's not really much he can do with the squad that he has been handed and the injuries that have unfortunately just happened. I mean, what do we think? Do we think he'll stay on? Because it kind of feels like it would be a very weird one for him not to stay on and for them to look for someone completely different. You might as well have just kept Taylor on. If you weren't going to keep Nick Cushing, you might as well have just kept Taylor on to the end and found that forever person or the next big manager.
I disagree. I think it'd be unusual to keep him. He came in as interim. He came in to steady the ship. He came in because he knew the setup, he knew the club, and he could provide that kind of stability, I suppose. I think had he done magic things with the squad and confirmed Champions League and won a piece of silverware, maybe it'd be a different story. And I appreciate, like you say, look, the injuries aren't his fault, but I think it'd be unusual to quite quickly pick an interim manager who was the previous manager and then go, fuck it, sure, he can stay on. It just feels a little bit, I don't want to say unambitious, but like I don't feel like they had a really in-depth look at what coaches are available and what will be best for the squad. They said, who can help us steady the ship when we get rid of Taylor? And I don't think that's a way of picking a long-term manager, in my opinion. That's not to say he couldn't necessarily do the job, but I think they do need to look around and see who's available and who might be a perfect fit.
I think, I mean, obviously we've seen an interim situation at Arsenal with Renée Slegers sort of jumping in and then obviously been given the permanent contract. Obviously that did come off the back of, you know, a spate of what incredible run of form from Arsenal. And it felt like they'd
10 unbeaten games, yeah.
10 unbeaten games. Like the players that they were enjoying themselves. They were finding their feet again. They were, you know, all the things that had previously been happening under Jonas seemed kind of almost resolved in a way. Obviously that's not been the case with City and Nick Cushing, but also there has been so many things that have been outside of his control. So I don't know. It just feels like it would be a weird one to bring in an interim manager who has that experience at the club for only, 3 months just to kind of steady the ship. To me, it feels like a longer term. He's, you know, there was that kind of back and forth with him before Christmas about whether he was going to come over, and he would say, well, no, of course, I'm so committed to US men's football. And everyone was like, are you? That sounds absolute bullshit. Oh Christ, there you are. For me, it kind of feels like I think they'll give him at least another season, because that would be fair to kind of assess. Think.
Yeah, I'd love to hear like if they think it would be weird to stay on or if it'd be weird for him to go.
Definitely let us know. I think at the moment it just feels like very 50-50, but Rach is saying he leaves. I'm saying
I'd be surprised if he stayed.
Yeah. But yeah, let us know. While of course Man City may or may not be changing their coach at the end of the season, Man United boss Mark Skinner recently signed a contract extension until June 2027. He's currently the longest serving WSL manager, which I think has been I think it's come as a surprise given all the turbulence that's happened in the WSL manager merry-go-round. The fact that Mark Skinner has his job, I think, was probably it wasn't a lot of people's bingo cards, I don't think. Do we think some of the criticism around the contract extension is unfair, or do we actually think, do you know what, he's just guided them to their third FA Cup final in a row, on course to secure the Champions League spot for the second time in their history? That's not, as Man United accolades go, that's not bad at all. Yeah,
but it's not just about results, is it? And I think that's what a lot of fans have been worried about and concerned about is the stuff coming out from players who had been there and in fact at times were there, very unhappy with the setup and with things going on, and they've spoken openly about it. And I just don't think, I think the fact that United have kind of not really addressed that has just left fans feeling uncomfortable. And I think it's not as simple as saying, well, he's gotten to the FA Cup final 3 times and they've won it once. Like, there's other stuff around it that I think has made fans unhappy, and not addressing that has just further made them unhappy, if you know what I mean. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily unfair criticism. If you don't address the situation, then it's not unfair, is it? Like, you're ignoring something that people are kind of unhappy about. And I think if they addressed that better and spoke directly to the fans about it, it might be a different situation. But if you're going to ignore it, you're going to get criticised. On a football point of view, I can understand that perspective being a bit more positive. And you know, they're a relatively young team. They've been knocking in the top 4 now for a number of years, finishing second at one point, pushing Chelsea, you know, in games. And I think winning silverware is really important as well. But also, I didn't expect anything less from Manchester United at the moment, given how they speak about their women's team. And I didn't see them going and doing a real deep search for who could really fit in this squad and who'd be a great next manager. I think on top of that, it's an easy decision to keep him on and have him carry on doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think obviously there's been a few comments where Mark Skinner's obviously shown a little bit of a kind of allegiance, I suppose, to Ineos and Jim Ratcliffe. And obviously there's so much conflict, I think, between, you know, the way the players are feeling and also the management and the board and their intentions for the squad. And I think, you know, when it's going to create a quite difficult situation where you've got a manager who is sort of openly saying all these positive things about like the investors and, you know, the relationship that he has with them, but also then understanding that your players are in a completely different situation and don't necessarily feel that they're getting the respect they deserve from the top levels of the club. It's an iffy one. Do I think it was the right call? I'm a little bit on the fence about it. And I think you're right. Like, you've got such a talented squad there. I mean, we've just talked about how incredible some of the players were. Celine Bizet's was amazing. You know, Ella Toone, Galton. And let's actually just briefly touch on, I know you spoke about it at the top of the show, and I kind of want to give it a little bit of airtime because Fallon Tullis-Joyce, I mean, talk to me a little bit more then about this double save. I've got to talk about, about any excuse to talk about goalkeepers generally, but this was a phenomenal performance for her.
Now, I know I'm not a football goalkeeper, but I was a hockey goalkeeper. And what really impressed me, obviously the instinctiveness, the double save, the getting the leg out for the second shot was incredible. For me, it was the speed at which she got up off the ground, because
Definitely.
I've found myself in those positions before where you've gone full stretch, ended up in a heap for a save, and you need to be on your feet within seconds. And that is really fucking hard work to do, to get your body up that quickly, and not just to get up and be upright, but to then be so switched on that you can immediately react to the second shot. So actually for me, it was the speed at which she recovered from the first save to make the second save that I just thought was incredible. And I absolutely loved her celebration as well. I thought it was such a good celebration, that roar. So yeah, that like gave me tingles. I thought it was a super save. Maybe even, I mean, save of the season is generally, well, even if they do save of the season, is generally around the WSL, the league. But I think that one was definitely up there at what I've seen so far this season.
Oh my God, definitely. The reaction time was so minimal. And I think, I mean, I love the fact as well, like you said, Rach, she wasn't humble about it. You know, so often like goalkeepers will like make an incredible save and they'll kind of like be, you know, a little wry smile or something, and like they'll start shouting aggressively. But she was just like, yeah, fuck it, that was amazing. And I was like, yeah,
Did you see that?
Yeah, come on. That was incredible. And I absolutely rate that. I really, really rate that from her. Like, why shouldn't she be bigging herself up? We'd have the same thing if a striker scored a goal. Like, why shouldn't you be doing that as a goalkeeper? So yeah, absolutely love that. And obviously she had an incredible season anyway. I think it's another criticism from Man City, but my God, you've got an open goal, you've got a goalkeeper that's just about to get up off the floor. Why are you softly headering it in like it's a done deal? Take that thing and smash the ball into the back of the net. Like, not being a fact, they should have put Fallon Tullis-Joyce into the back of the net with that ball, and instead it was just like a little bit of a nod. And I was like, that just goes to show kind of like where Man City's mentality is, but also in that situation.
The wrong people in the wrong situation, because they're so all over the place with their players and who they have available. And you just think back to maybe the goal Miedema scored against Chelsea, and then she scored another one, I can't remember who it was against, the following week, but absolutely buries it from about 5 yards. And it's that kind of like, get in the fucking goal. I don't care if the goalkeeper's there. If I hit it hard enough, it's going to go in kind of vibe. That instinctiveness, which I spoke about.
Well, it's that, and I think that was completely lacking. And now, obviously, both teams will face each other at Wembley on the 18th of May. Man United, obviously, the current title holders, beating Chelsea in the semi-final last year 2-1 to get there. They then beat Spurs 4-0 to take home the trophy. Not a great run out for Spurs, who obviously reached the final for the first time in the club's history. But yeah, do we think we're going to get the second time in a row? Are they going to defend their trophy? Do we think they've got it in them?
I think the fact they're coming into this final having won a final, and having beaten Chelsea last year to get to said final, I said, with a somewhat new squad, to be notching off those experiences will be massively helpful for them. Being there, done that, know how to do it. It's less of, a final's daunting, but it's less of an unknown. So I think that will stand to them. They didn't lose by much when they played Chelsea 2 years ago in the final. That is another experience that they have for them. So it does make for a very intriguing day. I think it also could depend on where Chelsea are within the Champions League. Have they got a final to worry about the following week? Have they just been knocked out of the Champions League and they're absolutely raging and they want to make sure that they get their hands on that trophy? I think those kind of narratives could be really interesting. Maybe one thing that stood to Manchester United is that they haven't had to worry about that. They haven't had to juggle that as many competitions, say, as Chelsea have, and maybe that will be the thing that gives them the edge, or conversely it could be the thing that gives Chelsea the edge, is that maybe they've just won, maybe they've just lost. How's that going to impact them? Because there's a bit of time between, a whole week between the end of the league and the FA Cup final.